folks, thanks you for tuning in to hashtag GoRight with Peter Boykin. Just to let you know, there's been a lot going on with the vote, and as put in the title, they have voted 2 articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. One, we've already talked about, is that they claim that he somehow colluded with another country. They already spent 2 years proving that this was incorrect. So that just throws that out. And then 2, he's dangerous to the Constitution because he's not producing the documents they want fast enough, because he's actually going to the judicial branch to take care of it. So I want you to watch these clips. I'm around, but this is mainly video, good video out there for you to intake and see what's going on, and you should be outraged. So in 2020, you should be coming out strong. So here we go, folks.
The Judiciary Committee will come to order, a quorum being present. Having agreed yesterday to the amendment in the nature of a substitute on articles of impeachment against President Donald J. Trump, the pending business is reporting the resolution favorably to the House. Reporting quorum being present, the question is now on the motion to report the resolution H-Res 755 is amended favorably to the House. Pursuant to Clause 5 of House Rule 16, because the resolution contains 2 distinct propositions, we will divide the question between the 2 articles. The question now is on Article 1 of the resolution, impeaching President Donald J. Trump for abusing his powers. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Nadler?
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren?
Aye.
Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Ms. Jackson-Lee?
Aye.
Ms. Jackson-Lee votes aye. Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
Mr. Cohen votes aye. Mr. Johnson of Georgia?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes aye. Mr. Deutsch?
Aye.
Mr. Deutsch votes aye. Ms. Bass?
Aye.
Ms. Bass votes aye. Mr. Richmond?
Yes.
Mr. Richmond votes yes. Mr. Jeffries?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries votes aye. Mr. Cicilline?
Aye.
Mr. Cicilline votes aye. Mr. Swalwell?
Aye.
Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Ms. Jayapal?
Aye.
Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Ms. Demings?
Aye.
Ms. Demings votes aye. Mr. Correa?
Yes.
Mr. Correa votes yes. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia votes aye. Mr. Neguse?
Aye.
Mr. Neguse votes aye. Ms. McBath?
Aye.
Ms. McBath votes aye. Mr. Stanton?
Aye.
Mr. Stanton votes aye. Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Dean votes aye. Ms. McCarcel-Powell?
Aye.
Ms. McCarcel-Powell votes aye. Ms. Escobar?
Aye.
Ms. Escobar votes aye. Mr. Collins?
No.
Mr. Collins votes no. Mr. Sensenbrenner?
No.
Mr. Sensenbrenner votes no. Mr. Shabbat?
No.
Mr. Shabbat votes no. Mr. Gomert?
My vote is no.
Mr. Gomert votes no. Mr. Jordan?
No.
Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Buck?
No.
Mr. Buck votes no. Mr. Radcliffe? Mr. Radcliffe votes no. Ms. Roby? Ms. Roby votes no. Mr. Gates?
No.
Mr. Gates votes no. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana?
No.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes no. Mr. Biggs?
No.
Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock?
No.
Mr. McClintock votes no. Ms. Lesko?
No.
Ms. Lesko votes no. Mr. Reschenthaler?
No.
Mr. Reschenthaler votes no. Mr. Klein?
No.
Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Armstrong?
No.
Mr. Armstrong votes no. Mr. Stubbe?
No.
Mr. Stubbe votes no.
Has every member voted who wishes to vote?
Mr. Chairman, may I ask
Clerk
how
Wilson.
I'm recorded?
How is
Mr.
the gentleman recorded?
Mr. Gohmert, you are recorded as no.
Yeah, I want to make sure.
The clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 17 noes.
The article is agreed to. The question now is on Article 2 of the resolution, impeaching President Donald J. Trump for obstructing Congress. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Nadler?
Aye.
Mr. Nadler votes aye. Ms. Lofgren?
Aye.
Ms. Lofgren votes aye. Ms. Jackson Lee?
Aye.
Ms. Jackson Lee votes aye. Mr. Cohen?
Aye.
Mr. Cohen votes aye. Mr. Johnson of Georgia?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson of Georgia votes aye. Mr. Deutsch?
Aye.
Mr. Deutsch votes aye. Ms. Bass?
Aye.
Ms. Bass votes aye. Mr. Richmond?
Yes.
Mr. Richmond votes yes. Mr. Jeffries?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries votes aye. Mr. Cicilline?
Aye.
Mr. Cicilline votes aye. Mr. Swalwell?
Aye.
Mr. Swalwell votes aye. Mr. Liu? Mr. Raskin?
Aye.
Mr. Raskin votes aye. Ms. Jayapal?
Aye.
Ms. Jayapal votes aye. Ms. Demmings?
Aye.
Ms. Demmings votes aye. Mr. Correa?
Yes.
Mr. Correa votes yes. Ms. Scanlon?
Aye.
Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Ms. Garcia?
Aye.
Ms. Garcia votes aye. Mr. Neguse?
Aye.
Mr. Neguse votes aye. Ms. McBath?
Aye.
Ms. McBath votes aye. Mr. Stanton?
Aye.
Mr. Stanton votes aye. Ms. Dean?
Aye.
Ms. Dean votes aye. Ms. McCarcel Powell?
Aye.
Ms. McCarcel Powell votes aye. Ms. Escobar?
Aye.
Ms. Escobar votes aye. Mr. Collins?
No.
Mr. Collins votes no. Mr. Sensenbrenner?
No.
Mr. Sensenbrenner votes no. Mr. Shabbat? Mr. Shabbat votes no. Mr. Gohmert?
No.
Mr. Gohmert votes no. Mr. Jordan? No. Mr. Jordan votes no. Mr. Buck? Mr. Buck votes no. Mr. Radcliffe? Mr. Radcliffe votes no. Ms. Roby?
No.
Ms. Roby votes no. Mr. Gates?
No.
Mr. Gates votes no. Mr. Johnson of Louisiana?
No.
Mr. Johnson of Louisiana votes no. Mr. Biggs?
No.
Mr. Biggs votes no. Mr. McClintock?
No.
Mr. McClintock votes no. Ms. Lesko?
No.
Ms. Lesko votes no. Mr. Reschenthaler?
No.
Mr. Reschenthaler votes no. Mr. Klein?
No.
Mr. Klein votes no. Mr. Armstrong?
No.
Mr. Armstrong votes no. Mr. Stubbe?
No.
Mr. Stubbe votes no.
Is there every member of the committee who wishes to vote voted? The clerk will report.
Mr. Chairman, there are 23 ayes and 17 noes.
The article is agreed to. The resolution as amended is ordered reported favorably to the House. Members will have 2 days to submit views. The resolution will be reported as a single amendment in the nature of a substitute. Without objection, staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes. Without objection, the committee is adjourned.
Mr. Chairman,
For
pursuant
what purpose does the gentleman seek recognition?
to Clause 2L of Rule 11, I give notice of intent to file dissenting views.
Notice is heard. Without objection, the committee is adjourned.
Thank you for tuning in with hashtag GoRight with Peter Boykin. So like we basically seen just right there a completely partisan vote. The left ignoring actual real rules, going through the points we've already talked about. One is bullcrap because they say he's colluding with another nation, which has been proven as nothing. They haven't been able to find anything. And then the second is being upset because Donald Trump at the White House basically said they're not just going to turn over whatever and go in and using the actual powers of the Constitution in order to take care of any kind of remedies. So neither one of these is for a real reason to impeach a president. But if this is what we're going to be going with in the future, like one guy says, I hope that we don't have to deal with this when, say, the Democrats are in and the Republicans have to do this same thing. I mean, is this completely changing our government system? So we're going to have some reactions up from the Republicans, and then the response, or what Nadler said, that'll be coming up here in just a moment. And then afterwards we'll show some clips from the previous talking about the outrage and everything. And a lot of these clips, everything comes from Fox News. And I'm glad you're tuning in with hashtag GoRight with Peter Boykin. Please share this. See you in just a little bit.
Anybody else coming? Oh, good. Debbie.
Good.
I'll just start off. Well, this is really a sad day. Big show. Everybody got dressed up. Really no place to go. We voted on a provision, an allegation of abuse of power. There was an abuse of power at the Department of Justice. There was an abuse of power at the FBI. There was an abuse of power at the FISA court. There was abuse of power in our intel community. There was abuse of power. Even DOD was paying money to help set up the president. So there were all kinds of abuses of power, perhaps none more so than in the House of Representatives by the majority. This is an outrage. It sets the bar for any president of any party for the future to go through 3 years of hell like this president has. It's really unfortunate. This is a sad day for the country. It's going nowhere in the Senate, but I really hope and pray the Senate will not just pick it up and dismiss it. America needs to hear from the witnesses. And we didn't get to hear from them here. This was a kangaroo court. Outrageous to put the country through this, and we get a report. And we don't even get to examine the maker of the report. So it's a very sad day. I'm just glad I had such an incredible team I got to be on. These are really quality folks. Debbie, you want to?
Thank you. Well, this is really a travesty for America, and it's really tearing America apart. I have never in my entire life seen such an unfair, rigged railroad job against the President of the United States. I have known that my fellow Democrats were going to go for impeachment since January of this year when they got power. And here we are today. They predetermined they were going to do it, and they did it, come hell or high water. They had no proof, no evidence, no crime, but they went ahead anyway, and they're tearing the country apart, and they should be ashamed.
the founding fathers, the founders of this country warned against single-party impeachments, and they had a very specific reason for warning us against that. They said that it would be bitterly divisive, perhaps irreparably divisive for the country, and that's what's happened now. This is the first time in the history of this nation, in 243 years, that a president has been treated in this manner, when one party has followed and pursued a predetermined political outcome to get to that end. You have to remember that before the famous July 25th phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky that supposedly sparked all of this whole charade, 95 House Democrats had already voted to proceed with impeaching Donald Trump before any of these facts came forward. That's just not right. They determined this. They said it from the day he took his oath of office that they would remove him, and they pursued that end. So this is what we're left with. 14 hours yesterday and a few moments this morning, this anticlimactic end to this whole charade was fitting and appropriate. There wasn't much there, and that's what happened here. I think the American people are going to militate against this. I think the polling shows that they've been very frustrated. They see what's happened here. They see the lack of evidence. They see this paper-thin impeachment proceeding, what ultimately developed of it, that there's nothing behind it. I think we showed that very clearly, and I think there's going to be a huge political price paid by the Democrats at the polls next year. And what we're ultimately concerned about, beyond the price that's paid in this short-term period, is what this is going to do to our republic going forward. The founders were right. They have divided the country even further, and I think that it's going to be very difficult for us in this institution to put this genie back in the bottle, and that's ultimately what we're all so concerned about.
In the media, you should hold the Democrats to the standard that they set for themselves, not the standard they set back in 1998 when Jerry Nadler said that impeachment would have to be supported by substantially a bipartisan group to be legitimate. Look at the standard they set for themselves just a few months ago. Democrats said that the evidence would have to be overwhelming, and yet in hearing after hearing, the evidence they presented was either hearsay, speculation and conjecture, or the result of a policy disagreement about how to treat the Ukraine. Democrats promised that after public hearings there would be some newfound animated public support for impeachment. The reality is they failed to meet their burden. And so now, with no bipartisanship, matter of fact, the only bipartisan vote will be a bipartisan vote against impeachment, with no direct evidence, with no enhanced public support for impeachment, Democrats will continue to visit the opportunity costs for this division on our country. As Republicans, we would like to work on infrastructure, on asylum reform, on policy changes that will actually impact the quality of life for our constituents. But for Democrats, impeachment is their drug, it is their obsession, it is their total focus, and it is deeply disappointing that they failed to meet the standard that they set for themselves. Questions?
Yeah, Congressman, do you guys worry about the precedent that this sets on obstruction of Congress? The fact that this administration did not comply, did not cooperate at any point with this investigation, which has not happened before.
No, the administration has cooperated with fair and reasonable oversight. But when Democrats made clear that this was not about oversight, it was about impeachment, it was about an illegitimate process, then I think that reasonably informed the administration's position on whether or not to validate this absurd process.
Wait a minute.
Both the Nixon and Clinton administrations cooperated or provided some information in their impeachment investigation.
Yes.
Have the charges changing constantly.
Let me address this as we did yesterday. You have to understand that the Trump administration has cooperated. Okay, just this year, they understand Congress's oversight and investigation responsibility, and they've acknowledged it. 25 members of the administration have testified before oversight. 20 have testified before the Judiciary Committee. When the impeachment proceeding began, over 100,000 pages were submitted by the White House to Congress pursuant to our request. And, of course, he immediately released the transcript, the famous transcript of the phone call. The president has not been obstructing this at all. What he's worried about is the process, is this unprecedented charade that's gone on. Adam Schiff controlling this in the basement, having secret hearings, cherry-picking witnesses, denying Republican questions, not allowing Republican witnesses to come forward. There's been no chance for the president's counsel to participate in the early stages of this. This whole thing was rigged. I'm an attorney. Many of us are. If we were advising our client, and our client in this case happened to be Donald Trump, we would tell him not to participate in that because it's an ambush. We got ambushed last night on the scheduling. At every stage of this, the Democrats have tried to railroad the president, and that's why he's had some concern. The fact that they brought an impeachment claim of obstruction is absurd. The Obama administration, the one just prior to this one, went to court. They didn't turn in pleadings and all the documents and witnesses that were requested in the Fast and Furious investigation. They went to the third branch of government. That's the way our system is set up. When there is a natural impasse that develops between the legislative and executive branches, we have the third branch of government, the judiciary. They could have easily gone a few blocks away to a federal court, gotten an order to compel the production of anything else they needed, but they didn't have time to do that. You know why? We all know why. Because they guaranteed to their radical left base that they would impeach Donald Trump by Christmas. That's why we're here. That's why we've done all this, and that's why they didn't go through the normal process, the custom and practice of every previous administration in the modern era.
I mean, at the end of the day, the Democrats control the House of Representatives. They can determine what the process is. You guys might not like it. There are politics in this. There were politics in 1999 with President Clinton. We hear what you're saying, but that said, don't they have the right to handle this in the fashion that
They don't
see
have the right to abuse the process, and this was a total abuse of process. It was a witch hunt. That's why they could not settle on a charge until they had exhausted that there was no evidence of a crime. And let me just tell you, if the DOJ and the FBI went after you and your family and your business associates, harassed them, and you find out, as the president did early on, this was all a scam to bring him down, then you would be wise, and I bet most any attorney would say, don't you go and they're looking for anything. Don't help them crucify you. It would not be smart. The president did the right thing. The obstruction of justice was right here. Well, of course, also DOJ, FBI, but hopefully there'll be people pay for that.
Says that he's not likely to bring forward witnesses in the Senate trial.
That'd be a big mistake.
You have called for witnesses. How do you think that you're actually going to get your story out? This is not what McConnell
The
says
Senate
he
promised that for months now they would have witnesses, and I really understand the desire. This was a ridiculous process, a report, no real witnesses here. So I understand their desire to just get it behind us, but the country needs to hear what a farce this was. They really need to bring in witnesses. They're the chance to clean this mess up, and I sure hope they will.
Congressman, this is a president who just yesterday called a teenager on the autism spectrum a person with an anger management problem. Does that make it harder to defend him this vigorously?
The president communicates in a unique way. He doesn't communicate the way I do and the way many of us would. But wait a minute, let me answer. 63 million Americans voted to make him the president of the United States. He has an unorthodox style, but what we're talking about in here is removing a president because the Democrats don't like that style. They don't like him. They don't like his Twitter account. They don't like many of his staff members. They don't like what he does in the office, but the way our system is designed, the way our Constitution is written, is the party in charge. Even if you have the majority in Congress, you don't get to remove a president because you don't like him. They did not produce a scintilla of evidence to support a charge of impeachment, and that is the question at the end of the day. That's why we're so frustrated. We may not have a trial in the Senate. The president may not get a chance to put on his witnesses and put on his defense, but we're going to do it to our constituents and the American people every opportunity we have. And I don't know. I think that's about it.
Why is it ever okay for an American president to ask a foreign power to investigate a political rival? Why do you think that's okay?
He didn't do that.
He did ask Zelensky.
He did not do that.
He asked President Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. Why is it okay?
That was because I think logically, more likely than the Democrat story, is because he wanted to vet out the corruption. He had seen the video of Joe Biden bragging about how he was going to withhold $1 billion from Ukraine if they didn't fire the prosecutor, the same prosecutor that had been investigating Burisma, the corrupt company where his son was getting paid to be on the board. That's corruption. That had corruption, plain and simple, according to an Obama administration person on a similar case, who said that is corruption, plain and simple. And I think it's the responsibility of the President of the United States, before he hands over taxpayer dollars to investigate corruption, and I believe part of that corruption was with the Bidens.
He never mentioned corruption at all on that phone
Do
call.
you want witnesses at the Senate trial to agree with that? I will.
Republicans have gleaned from this process that we cannot be attacked for dislike. We're doing the duty that the Constitution asks us to do. Why don't we go to the American people and explain to them that they are blessed by a Constitution that has lived this long and provided us the framework. Now only in modern times, 3 presidents out of 45. In modern times, I believe this nation is now ready to move forward. And as we debate this week, our tones will be sober and somber, but it'll be on the facts. And we expect that maybe someone will be convinced to look at the facts and the Constitution. That's what we'll adhere to.
But half of the country has not been convinced after all of these hearings. They're not convinced. They think you're going to tear the country apart. What do you say to those people?
What I say to them is read that little book. We have been resilient. We have been resilient. And I think we have gone over and over again into times of trouble, from wars to divisive times, and we have survived. And I want to say to them that you will survive, we will survive as a country. Why? Because in surviving, we have a basic framework of laws that respects every individual in this country and says no one is above the law. I hope that the divisiveness will be tempered by the fact that we are people of faith. I have faith, and I think that in having faith, you have to look at what your duty is. Your duty rises above the criticism, and so I hope the members of Congress, every one of those members across the aisle I've worked with, every one of the members in the United States Congress, House, I've had the privilege of working with, Republicans and Democrats. And so I see them as representing their viewpoint. But what I would say to you in that doesn't mean we cannot come together. We'll be voting on a number of things next week. This has been a very active Congress led by Speaker Pelosi. We have a lot of good laws that we've passed. We're going to keep passing on behalf of the American people, and we're going to make sure that someone who has broken the law, and I just want to say, yes, the Constitution is the law of the land. There are constitutional crimes, and the President has broken those constitutional crimes.
So after President was impeached in the 90s, his ratings actually went up. What if that happens to President Trump and going into 2020? Are you all going to be able to work with him now for conceivably 5 more years? Or are we going to see ourselves continuing to have to investigate his actions?
I'm going to take one step at a time. I don't believe this is, at this point in my heart, about politics. All of us have the requirement of going home to our constituency and dealing with our representation. But today, as I looked at the members of our delegation, if you will, the members on our side, Democrats, not one person was gleeful, not one person had a happy note. We were glad that we were able to use the Constitution in an orderly and somber and sober manner. And so with that in mind, politics, be darned. Let them fall where they fall. Let everybody vote their conscience, their heart, their faith, because that was what this was. It was faith in the Constitution and our laws. It was faith in this nation. It was faith in the men and women, again, that wear the uniform, who I have seen on front lines and who I know are committed not to one American, one region, one color or creed or religion, but they are committed to this country. What we did today was a commitment to the nation, and using the very book that has brought us this far, as George Washington said, I will not abandon the Constitution. We did not abandon it today. Thank you.
Timeline of the House, the likely House vote, and quick timeline expected in the Senate. And are you worried about this becoming more frequent? Of course, thank you.
Okay. Today is a solemn and sad day. For the third time in a little over a century and a half, the House Judiciary Committee has voted articles of impeachment against the President for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The House will act expeditiously. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, are you disappointed there was no obstruction of justice? So why would you take custody, sir?
Thanks everybody for tuning in to hashtag with Peter, GoRight with Peter Boykin. Like we just basically saw today already, we saw the vote. We saw the reactions by the Republicans saying same things I've been saying and what everybody else, the American public, can say. Just the obvious. If you open up your mind, regardless of what political power you are under or what influence, you should actually be able to understand the facts. And I don't know. Republicans seem like they're the people who know by the facts and go by the facts. I can't understand how the left believe that they can commit a crime, but somehow the Republicans pay for their crimes. The left are the same people who basically stated, I mean, there was a case where a burglar broke into an individual's home, okay? The burglar tripped, hurt themselves, I think broke their leg. I think the leg might have been amputated. He sued the homeowner for breaking and hurting his leg, and the actual jury awarded the robber money. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. That's what the left does. So they would have a cop pull you over, you're the criminal, yeah, you go free, and the cop goes to jail. That's what the left's doing. They think Donald Trump should pay for the crimes of the left and the Democrats. The Democrats, the left, they're the ones that were co-conspiring with other countries to try to take down Donald Trump, the election, the Russians, and so forth. But they got caught, so they turned around and said, oh, no, Trump was doing it. They made up fake dossiers, fake data, spent 2-something years and a lot of money of American taxpayer money to come up with fake news. I mean, it's honestly fake news. So we got I've got a couple of clips that I'm going to put up here for you, and I hope you can watch these clips and add a little bit more knowledge to the understanding of what's actually really going on in here. And you should get mad. You should get mad and say you're not going to take this anymore. Just hashtag with Peter Boykin. At those clips coming up right now.
Joining us now is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is with us, and his memoir, by the way, is entitled The Long Game. It includes a new foreword by President Trump, and it's now out in paperback. Senator, good to see you. Welcome back to the program. It's been a while. I want to find out about the new foreword. I think most people don't fully understand. Let's assume for a minute that the House goes forward with this impeachment, and it's over to the Senate. Walk us through how this process works and the options available and what you see happening and how you see this going down.
First, as you've pointed out to your viewers, frequently the Democrats have been wanting to do this for 3 years. The first headline in the Washington Post before the president was inaugurated was they were going to impeach him. Well, they finally got around to it, and we assume we're going to see 2 articles of impeachment, both of them pretty weak stuff, coming over to us, and your question is what happens then? Under the rules of impeachment, the Senate then turns to it, has no option but to turn to it, and it's the sole business until we finish. How we can impact that really is just with 51 votes. The Chief Justice is in the chair. I don't expect the Chief Justice to try to tilt the playing field either way. We'll listen to the opening arguments by the House prosecutors. They will listen to the president's lawyers respond. And then we'll have to make a decision about the way forward. And everything I do during this, I'm coordinating with White House counsel. There will be no difference between the president's position and our position as to how to handle this to the extent that we can. We don't have the kind of ball control on this that a typical issue, for example, comes over for the House. If I don't like it, we don't take it up. We have no choice but to take it up, but we'll be working through this process, hopefully in a fairly short period of time, in total coordination with the White House counsel's office and the people who are representing the president in the well of the Senate.
So I've got to believe that the federal rules for the admission of evidence would apply here with the Chief Justice in charge, and that would mean there would be no hearsay evidence be allowed, and that would probably mean, well, you might have 1 or 2 opinion people, fact or experts, but when we watch this process unfold in the House, especially in the Schiff show, everyone was a hearsay or an opinion witness. The one fact witness said, oh, the president said he wants nothing, no quid pro quo. That was the only fact witness that I saw. So that would be Ambassador Sondland. Would that be, in your view, how the federal rules of evidence would apply here?
Well, exactly how we go forward, I'm going to coordinate with the president's lawyers. So there won't be any difference between us on how to do this. You raised the issue of what if you have witnesses. The president's counsel may or may not decide they want to have witnesses. The case is so darn weak coming over from the House. We all know how it's going to end. There's no chance the president's going to be removed from office. My hope is that there won't be a single Republican who votes for either of these articles of impeachment. And, Sean, it wouldn't surprise me if we got 1 or 2 Democrats. It looks to me over in the House, the Republicans seem to be solid and the Democrats seem to be divided.
Well, I think you rightly point out this is very weak. I mean, we'll look, for example, at the obstruction issue. So here, the president, like every other past president, has exerted executive privilege. Okay, yeah. They don't like it when there is a dispute between the legislative branch and the executive branch. Well, that would be the role of the judicial branch, which is to resolve the disputes between the other 2 branches of government. But apparently they're in such a rush to do this that they didn't want to give the courts any time, or perhaps even worse, they feared what the courts would decide.
Yeah, well, this is a thoroughly political exercise. It's not like a courtroom experience. It's a political exercise. They've been trying to do this for 3 years. They finally screwed up their courage to do it. It looks to me like it may be backfiring on them, particularly in swing districts that the Speaker's party managed to win in order to get to the majority. Most of the nervousness I see on this issue with the politicians, since it's a political process, is on the Democratic side.
So you will allow, let's assume it comes over to the Senate. You're obligated to take it up. I think everybody understands that.
Right.
Whoever the House chooses to present their case, they will present their case, however long period of time that takes. There is some dispute, and actually I could probably be persuaded on either side, which for me is a rare thing, Senator. And that would be, okay, a lot of people would like to bring in Adam Schiff, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden. I think I'm more inclined to agree with Senator Graham on this. It's tempting, and I do believe that all of those things must be looked into. There are a lot of real questions here, but I don't know if that would be the appropriate forum once you would have the 51 votes at that point to end this, which, again, very weak case. I think it would be smart to do so. Where would your inclination be?
Yeah, again, I'm going to take my cues from the president's lawyers. But yes, if you know you have the votes, you've listened to the arguments on both sides, and believe the case is so slim, so weak, that you have the votes to end it, that might be what the president's lawyers would prefer. And you can certainly make a case for making it shorter rather than longer, since it's such a weak case.
Okay. Are you confident? So we talked about, for example, the obstruction charge, and the other one would be the abuse of power charge. You've read the phone call. You've watched, I'm sure, a lot of the coverage that has taken place in the House. Do you see any evidence of any wrongdoing whatsoever on the president's part? As you read that transcript, I read it over and over again. I certainly don't see what we hear Joe Biden bragging about. You're not getting $1 billion taxpayer dollars unless you fire the prosecutor he knew was investigating his son with zero experience making millions. That didn't happen.
Well, this is a really weak case, and that's why I think you're going to see bipartisan opposition to the articles over in the House.
How long do you think, and we'll move on from here, how long would you imagine after the House presents its case, and that will happen in full?
Well, look, if they do it this next week, Sean, we will be able to get consent to go home for Christmas. So we would turn to it right around the first of the year, and we would stay on it until we finish. And my hope is that it will be a shorter process rather than a lengthy process.
So you have your book, and look, Donald Trump is a lot of things, and I probably have known him maybe longer than you, well over 20-some-odd years. He's a disruptor. He's an iconoclast. He is a fighter. He's also gotten a lot of good things done for the country. He kept a lot of promises with your help on judges, tax cuts. Certainly, he's got the money for the wall, ending burdensome regulation, better trade deals. Baghdadi's dead. The caliphate defeated. What have you learned over this time with the president now, almost 3 years, that maybe you didn't know?
Well, let me tell you what this book is about. This book is about the most long-lasting contribution that Donald Trump and Senate Republicans have made for the country. And that is putting young men and women who are strict constructionists, who believe the job of a judge is to follow the law, on the courts. We did our 50th Circuit Court judge just yesterday. Sean, to put that in perspective, Barack Obama did 55 circuit judges in 8 years. We've done 50 in 3 years, and we have at least a year left for sure. We're going to do more. 1/4 of the circuit judges. Remember, most cases don't make it to the Supreme Court. Most complex litigation never makes it beyond the circuit courts. This has been the most long-lasting, important contribution the president could make well into the future, far beyond his tenure in office. So we'll have a judiciary more inclined not to make it up on the fly. You know, President Obama said he wanted to appoint judges who had empathy. Well, you know, that makes great sense if you're the litigant before the judge for whom the judge has empathy. Not so good if you aren't.
Let's talk about the issue has come up. Let's say somebody were to retire at the end of this year, leading into the summer. You have been very clear, if the president appointed somebody, you would follow through on that nomination.
Absolutely. We definitely would do that. And this paperback that we were just talking about, the president's foreword is about judges. My afterword catches up what's happened during the Trump administration on judges, because my memoir came out 3 years ago. before the president was elected. What we've done here, the president and I together with this paperback that you've shown on the screen, is to talk about how the Judge Project came about, how it went forward. If you can recall, Sean, the most important decision I've made in my entire political career was not to fill the Supreme Court vacancy when Justice Scalia passed away. That was the beginning, and now we've got an exclamation point here after 3 years that we thought the public would be interested in reading about, and that's why the president and I collaborated on this paperback.
I was shocked that former President Obama left so many vacancies and didn't try to fill those positions.
I'll tell you why. I was in charge of the of what we did the last 2 years of the Obama administration.
I will give you full credit for that. And by the way, take a bow. All right, that was a good line. Well, congratulations on the book. We'll be watching, obviously, very closely in the Senate. Do you see any possible defections?
I doubt it. I doubt it. There's zero chance the president obviously would be removed from office, and I'm hoping we'll have no defections at all.
Author of the New York Times bestseller on freedom of the press. As you know, I call him the Great One. He hosts Life, Liberty, and Levin, the #1 show, 8 p.m. Sunday night, right here on the Fox News Channel, also a syndicated radio host. And this Sunday, he has a very special guest, me, for the full hour. Great One. There's a lot of seriousness here, because when we really get to the heart of this, this is your wheelhouse. This is about the Constitution. Our framers and founders never imagined this.
Well, let's take a look at this. First of all, let's look at the committee chairman and the speaker. You have Pelosi, Schiff, and Nadler. What do they have in common? A lot of things. They talk about the rule of law. They come from sanctuary cities that nullify federal law, and they support that. They obstruct ICE and law enforcement. They reject our immigration laws, and now they're talking about the rule of law. They don't believe in the rule of law. The Constitution's the law of the land, not any of these potentates that run these committees, and not Nancy Pelosi. It's the president's duty to uphold the Constitution, not a rogue House where the Democrats are in control. Literally every president who crosses the House of Representatives in the future under the standardless procedures they have in place with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress is subject to potential impeachment if they don't bow to the will of the majority in the House of Representatives. First of all, obstruction of Congress, they say, right? Has the Senate done anything yet? So how is it obstruction of Congress? It's obstruction of a rogue faction of radical Democrats in the House of Representatives. Once they won the majority, they immediately ran for impeachment. The President of the United States has no obligation to them. Abuse of power they talk about. When the President of the United States, like every past president, even since George Washington, has fought to protect the office of the presidency against a Congress that is out of control, that demands his innermost information from his innermost witnesses, individuals who report to him. And he goes to court, and they say that's obstruction. Let me tell you something. Every past president who would be subject to impeachment under the current articles being debated in the House of Representatives, John Adams would be impeached. He shut down newspapers, he imprisoned reporters. Abraham Lincoln would be impeached. He shut down 300 newspapers, he imprisoned reporters. Thomas Jefferson would be impeached. The Louisiana Purchase without budget approval from the Congress. Woodrow Wilson would be impeached. He resegregated the civil service, and he put political opponents and reporters in prison. He would be impeached. The great FDR would be impeached. Internment of Japanese Americans, Italian Americans, German Americans, took their property, took their homes, used the Internal Revenue Service against the Philadelphia Inquirer owner, against the Gannett owner, used the IRS against his political opponents like Huey Long. FDR would be impeached 25 times. John Kennedy would be impeached. Used the IRS and the FBI against his political opponents, leaked information against them. Lyndon Johnson would be impeached. Used the IRS, the FBI, and the CIA to tap into his political opponents and into civil rights leaders, and by the way, became a multimillionaire while he was a senator. We'd have a lot of impeachment going on under these bogus rules that this rogue House Democrat leadership has put in place. Let's look at the history of the Democrat Party. It's an ugly history with some gaps of goodness. The party of slavery, the party of segregation, the party of Jim Crow. And when the Democrat Party does what it does like that, it needs to be slammed down. And it needs to be slammed down now. The next Democrat president of the United States must be impeached. Not to get even, not because we're at their low level, because the Republicans can't live under one constitution when the Democrats live under another constitution. And it's the only way we're going to stop them. One party can't be allowed to abuse the Constitution yet wave it around while the other party sits there and takes it. The Democrat Party must be slammed down. The next Democrat president, if they vote for impeachment against President Donald Trump, must be impeached. And we have the blueprint. It's the Pelosi project. She even said today, we've been at this for 22 months, for 2 years. What do you mean we're being fast here? We have the plan. Endless unconstitutional subpoenas. No resort to judicial review. No due process. Accusers are protected from scrutiny. Phone calls of foreign leaders must be released. The president's closest advisors must testify. Tax returns, business records, bank records, business associates, all subject to congressional access, and demand the appointment of a special counsel. That's the Pelosi project. It must become the Republican project when there is a Democrat president. One other thing. Look at this damn thing. This is 500 pages. This is the Mueller report. It took him 500 pages to say the President of the United States is an innocent man who didn't commit any crimes. 500 pages, 2.5 years, $40 million. That's that. Now we have another one that's 500 pages long. Look at this. Look at this. What is this? This is an Inspector General report that says what? That says the Obama administration, you listening, Mr. Holder? The Obama administration spied on the Trump campaign, tampered with evidence, repeatedly lied to a federal court, the FISA court, to get bogus warrants 4 times renewed, used a dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC that they knew was bogus, and that they used all of this, lies and crimes, to get this, a special counsel report that says your President of the United States is an innocent man. Donald Trump is upholding the Constitution. Donald Trump is the victim. It is the members of the House of Representatives, the Democrats. They're the ones who need to be impeached. That's it.
Great one. Thank you. Life, Liberty, and Levin. I will be Mark's guest Sunday night, 8 o'clock, right here on Fox. Hope you'll watch.
Hey folks, thanks for coming back to hashtag GoRight with Peter Boykin. There's been a lot going on lately in the House. They kept them up pretty late last night, and then Nadler basically said at the last minute, oh, we're just going to wait till the morning, which pissed off a lot of people, a lot of Republicans. And so there's been some back and forth video, and I think it's good to go over just what happened.
Welcome to Hannity, and this is a Fox News alert. At this hour, Nutty Jerry Nadler's circus, his shift show, is now still ongoing. We're going to monitor the charade throughout the hour. Plus, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, he will join us. He will tell us, well, if they do impeach the president, what will happen in the Senate. Important information. But tonight we start on November the 8th, 2016. 62 million Americans, we, the American people, you shocked the world, you voted for Donald Trump. He won a whopping 304 electoral votes. He carried over 30 states. And now Democrats are officially trying to flush that free and fair election down the toilet based on 0 high crimes, 0 misdemeanors, and 0 counts of bribery and 0 counts of treason. This is what we've gotten for 3 long years. Just 2 made-up, baseless, weak, factless charges that would never be allowed in a court of law. This charade boils down to one thing and one thing only, and that is the left, liberals, Democrats, socialists, and their media mob friends, they think that they know better than we, the people that voted for this president. Now, they look down their noses at us. Fine. They have contempt for our values, our views, and our life, and our way of life. They hate us, and they hate our choice for president. So for 3 years, 3 long years, they have desperately tried to undo an election and impeach Donald Trump. Don't take my word for it. Just listen to their dear, fearless leader, Speaker Pelosi, earlier this week. This is quite revealing. Take a look.
One of the biggest criticisms of the process has been the speed at which the House Democrats are moving. If this is, but seriously though, seriously.
It's been going on for 22 months, okay?
but a lot,
2.5 years, actually.
2.5 years since he got there. Rare moment of truth, even for Pelosi. Now, first, way back in January 2017, it was the Russia hoax in coordination with a corrupt, deceitful, propaganda, state-run Democratic Socialist TV mob in the media. Democrats have lied over and over and over again about Trump and Russia and collusion. The only collusion was the dirty Russian dossier that Hillary paid for. Then you got the compromised, corrupt, congenital liar, Adam Schiff. Said he had ample and significant evidence of collusion. Then we had the Schiff show, now the Nutty Nadler Schiff show. By the way, he's now running his own bull Schiff show. And he said there was collusion in plain sight, remember? Or Eric Swalwell. Oh, he did great in his run for the presidency, saying the president acts on Russia's behalf. Well, maybe it was Hillary who bought the Russian dossier. You got NBC News, chief conspiracy theorist. You got Area 51, Roswell Rachel Maddow, calling Trump a Russian op. Tom Brokaw, speak up. Are you proud of this? They were all lying through their teeth. 3 years, lies, misinformation, propaganda. They have smear, slander, besmirchment. This is who they are. This is what they do. 4 separate investigations found 0 evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. None. Zip. A huge blow to the Democrats' plan to impeach the president. They thought Mueller would get them over the finish line. So instead of apologizing for the years of lying to the country and putting the country through hell, well, they just simply move on to Plan B. Let's make up a new conspiracy theory. We'll call it the Ukrainian hoax. And now the election fast approaching. Democrats, they don't have any time to waste now. They can't rely on the American people to do their bidding. Take a look.
We cannot rely on an election to solve our problems when the president threatens the very integrity of that election. So, with a heavy heart, but clear in my duty to our country, I support these articles of impeachment. I urge my colleagues to support them as well.
All right, despite his heavy, or nutty heart of Nadler, well, he's now racing to get this thing across the finish line. And, of course, Pelosi announced that a vote will take place next week. For the past 10 straight hours, again today, Democrats in the House Judiciary Committee, they've been holding an all-day marathon. We got to get it done before Christmas hearing. In case you missed it, you learned absolutely nothing new all day. No new facts presented, no evidence introduced, no witnesses called. There's only been one fact witness. Everyone else hearsay or opinion. Instead, we hear from a bunch of Democratic lawmakers totally divorced from reality, living in the land of rage and hate and psychosis against Trump. One congressman comparing the impeachment charade actually to the civil rights and suffrage movements. Wow, they think a lot of themselves. Take a look.
Some will cynically argue that the impeachment of this president will further divide an already fractured union. Slavery once divided the nation, but emancipators rose up to clarify that all men are created equally. Suffrage once divided the nation, but women rose up to clarify that all voices must be heard in our democracy. Jim Crow once divided the nation, but civil rights champions rose up to clarify that all are entitled to equal protection under the law.
And all lies and all conspiracy theories have to be peddled. And as per usual, Democrats are clearly more interested in hyping up their own witch trial than actually getting to any truth or real justice, because the truth is not good for the Democratic Party. Take a look.
And this amendment strikes the reference to Joe Biden as the center of the proposed investigation and replaces it with the true topic of the investigation, Burisma and Hunter Biden. Hertz called the Prescott Police Department, and officers filed a narcotics offense report listing items seized in the car, including a plastic bag containing white powdery substance, a Secret Service business card, credit cards, and Hunter Biden's driver's license. It's a little hard to believe that Burisma hired Hunter Biden to resolve their international disputes when he could not resolve his own dispute with Hertz rental car over leaving cocaine and a crack pipe in the car.
Congressman Matt Gaetz advocating for an amendment to the Articles of Impeachment that would actually include language about Hunter Biden and, yeah, zero experience and the millions he's paid. Well, it's pretty simple. It was a quid and a pro and a quo by Joe and Hunter. Zero experience. Hunter, of course, was selling his access to his father. That's the real evidence of real abuse of power, which they ignore. That Gaetz amendment was ultimately defeated along party lines, along with several other amendments. The American people, we know what's going on here. This is nothing but a partisan circus to undo an election. President Trump will never be convicted in the Senate. Senator Graham will dismiss, and Senator McConnell will dismiss these phony charges, and all the other Republican senators. Look at your screen. Look at these 31 Democrats from those districts that President Trump carried in 2016. See Nancy Pelosi? She is now making all of those lawmakers walk the plank for nothing, sacrificing those seats to placate her radical extreme socialist base. And now some of these lawmakers are starting to waffle and buckle under the pressure. Take a look.
Are you ready to vote for them?
No, what I'm going to do right now is do what I was always trained to do as a CIA officer, which is sit by myself with a full body of information.
The question going forward will be, are these lawmakers going to do Pelosi's bidding, or will they actually represent the people that hired them?
I do understand why that the Senate would want a speedy trial. They have a lot of other stuff to do. They have to do more judges, and they have a lot on their plate. But what about accountability and justice? We said this during Kavanaugh. We say it now. Joining me now is Kellyanne Conway, counselor to the president, who I'm sure has been involved in a lot of these conversations about what next. Kellyanne, what is the White House's sense about this? We know you think it's a sham and a scam and a farce and a circus, but what about what's next? Take our viewers to that next step.
Sure. So the next step would be the Senate trial, where, unlike in these ridiculous House proceedings, the president and his attorneys would be permitted to present evidence, challenge evidence, present their own witnesses, challenge witnesses, object. Laura, in no court in this country would you have somebody who's in the role of the judge, Adam Schiff, Jerry Nadler, going off for 3 to 5 minutes, insulting and denigrating the defendant, Donald Trump, who, by the way, can't have his own attorney present. So we want our own president to have fewer due process rights than you would in any regular proceeding. But I have to say, looking forward to the Senate trial, let's focus on this week. This was one of the most successful weeks of the Trump presidency. He got the China trade deal phase 1 done, USMCA done, helping our farmers, auto workers, and lots of other people in this country, Mexico and Canada agreement. He got the NDAA signed again. We've had it in place for over 50 years. The third consecutive pay raise for our military on his watch. The third consecutive $700 billion plus investment in our military on his watch. The paid family leave, Space Force. That was all just this week, and we haven't even got to Friday yet.
So it's a sense. So Kellyanne,
you see the split screen presidency.
Yeah. What is your sense then? It's better to just, again, as Ed said, take the win and move on to substance?
No,
because
we've already got the win.
Yeah,
no,
because
we've already got the win.
Yeah,
we're already on substance. The president has been, he's been doing the business of his people. He's focused on what's important. They're focused on impeachment. No, I think we don't just, quote, take the win, because you have to fully, I think you fully exonerate the president. And we haven't had a chance to do that. I think the Democrats really screwed up the process many times here. She shouldn't have called for the impeachment inquiry, Nancy Pelosi, before she saw the call, the transcript. They should not have done a lot of things.
Do you think Kellyanne, you read people really well.
Yes.
Yeah, you read people really well. Do you think we were talking about this earlier, I'm just curious your opinion. Do you think Pelosi is kind of like saying, what did I do? I mean, inside, it's a guess.
Has to be. A year ago, she was whipping the votes to get, getting people to vote for her for Speaker. She almost didn't make it, if you remember. There were a lot of talk about people who had promised to get new leadership, fresh faces, new blood once they came to Washington as newly elected Democratic members of Congress were not going to vote for her for Speaker. She got those votes. She got it done. And I think since then, that was probably her best day, because since then, the agenda that has actually passed and is meaningful is the Trump agenda. He's been pushing for balanced reciprocal trade in China and with USMCA. Space Force is his and Vice President Pence's
Well, they don't
idea.
care about the substance. Yeah, they're not on substance. They're on destruction and takedown.
They don't have any wins. And there's something else going on here. I think that they all missed an opportunity to be here tonight. The President and the First Lady hosted the annual bipartisan congressional black tie affair here. The Democrats could have come and said, Mr. President, why don't you come to my district? I have the most seniors prescription drugs. Why don't you come? USMCA is going to help the farmers in my district. They're busy impeaching him instead of being here at the White House with the President, the First Lady, and everybody else and saying, hey, how can we work together? They have no interest in this. I think it's going to cost them dearly. They don't want to work together, but we just ignore that. It's almost been like an out-of-body experience for us. We're not participating in it, but we will be there for the Senate trial to be a real trial that the country can relate to.
As I said, after the Kavanaugh travesty of justice, people leaked documents and they never paid. They never were really exposed.
Well, they paid insofar as he's on the court, and they'll pay insofar as Donald Trump will remain as president for 5 years.
But we have bad actors still in the FBI, and we have bad actors who are still in politics, who are dragging this country through an impeachment. Kellyanne, great to see you tonight. Thanks so much for being with us.
Frustrations at a boiling point on Capitol Hill as House Democrats postpone their impeachment vote.
Republican Congressman Doug Collins blasting Democrats for the delay set by Chairman Nadler, and he joins us live from our nation's capital. Congressman, you were actually supposed to be on the couch with us today, but a funny thing happened between here and the couch. What happened last night?
I think it's called Democrats and a television camera is what happened last night. They got tired, and they said that they think Chairman Nadler made a calculation that they wanted to make sure that they could get it to another morning. They wanted to drag this out a little bit further because they have nothing that they have on this president. The president, we proved all day yesterday that the facts are just wrong. They're on the wrong side of history. So last night, to be, I guess, cute by half, they decided, well, we'll just put this off to go prayerfully consider what we're going to do at 10 a.m. Brian, they've not prayerfully considered anything in 3 years. They wanted to impeach this president since the day he was elected, and Chairman Nadler has been doing nothing but conducting this investigation to this point this year. It's just a travesty to the American people, and it'll show up next November.
They've been saying impeach, 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 finding different reasons to impeach since day one before he was in office, like you said, and then they finally get to the vote, and they don't want to do it. So this morning they're going to do it when all the television cameras are watching, when California's awake. What was your reaction? I mean, I heard you last night saying, this is a kangaroo court. This is ridiculous. But how does this change everyone's plans? Listen, I'm not saying Congress shouldn't work. I'm glad y'all are there. I'm sorry that it's interrupting your Christmas and going home this weekend. But what were folks saying in the halls of Congress? Were they saying, you know, I was supposed to be at my daughter's birthday tomorrow. They're just doing this for show. It's not, they're hijacking your weekend because they just want this to be on television.
Right. And for those of us who want to follow me around, I'll show them how we work all the time, because I work for my people in the 9th District of Georgia, and we work all the time. I got no problem being up here. What I do have a problem with is there's nothing controversial about this vote. They know how they're going to vote. They've known how they're going to vote. And this was simply a stunt by my chairman. It's Bush League. This is what this was. It was, they normally in any environment, normally the chairman and the ranking member at least talk about scheduling issues. We can disagree about the color of the sun, but we always talk about scheduling, so we're both online. But what I did find out last night was some of his own members didn't even know he was going to put it at 10 o'clock this morning. This is just how so scared they are of optics, how scared they are of the politics of this, and how they just don't have an answer for the American people, so they just have to make it up as they go, and they think if they say it long enough and loud enough, somebody will believe them.
Congressman Collins, one thing I thought was outrageous is when they said that Donald Trump is leaving the Ukrainians out there without any weapons, and you don't know what it's like. You served in the military. There's a lot of Republicans there, and that's where the rubber hit the road for you guys, because the previous administration didn't give them any weapons. They gave them supplies, and they gave it to a third nation, not even directly to Ukraine. The president delayed money after 2 years of giving them money.
Exactly. I mean, blankets don't stop bullets. And for those of us who served in war zones, yesterday, Eric Swalwell, who always comes up with just amazingly bad ideas, yesterday decided to double down and triple down on this idea that Ukrainians died because the money was being held.
So Undersecretary Hale actually just destroyed that argument. He said all the money we're discussing is for future events, not the current. But yet they kept perpetrating that lie over and over and over again. And it's not fair to the American people. No one died because of what was happening. That was a proper use of President Trump's authority. It was not due even until September 30th. And to say that Ukrainians died because of money was being held is a lie to the American people. They owe the American people, and frankly, the Ukrainian parents whose kids who died that they are using as a prop, an apology.
All right. Doug Collins joining us from Capitol Hill today. Sir, thank you very much. We've got a busy day. Thanks for dropping by Fox and Friends.
It's always good to be with y'all. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Chip, thank you. Great work there. I want to bring in Andy Biggs, House Judiciary Committee member, chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. And, sir, good morning to you. Late nights, early mornings, and thank you for your time. My guess is listening to Chad, this does get a vote this morning. You know what time, sir? Can you even predict that now?
Yeah, well, it's a little hard to predict depending on how Chairman Nadler wants to run the procedure this morning, but we're scheduled to go to the committee at 10, and during that time there'll be the vote on the underlying bill itself, which is the two articles of impeachment together. After that, there'll be a procedural mechanism, because they don't want to, as Chad said, they don't want to do it in one vote. They're going to split what's called dividing the question. They're going to split the issue here, so you have Article 1 and Article 2 will get separate votes on the floor. They're going to try to do that in the committee this morning. At least that's what they said last night before midnight. Who knows now, but that's what they said last night.
I'm reading here, Article 1 accuses the president of, quote, abusing his high office to enlist a foreign power and corrupting the democratic elections. Article number 2 charges the president unprecedented, categorical, indiscriminate defiance of subpoenas issued by the House of Representatives. Why was this pared down in the end, do you believe?
Well, it was pared down because they really don't have much evidence to support everything else that they've been going for. Remember, they started with Mueller, and they tested, they got quid pro quo, then they tested bribery, and so none of that worked for them, and so then they went to these two rather amorphous or rather broadly defined abuse of power and obstruction of Congress charges. Those are easier to prove in one sense because they're amorphous, they're not crimes, they don't fit within the constitutional bounds, but that's the problem with doing it that way as well. So it cuts both ways on that one.
When you consider you went to midnight last night, you knew in the end you would lose.
Yeah, that's right.
But it goes without saying that you were there to put up a fight. Knowing the ultimate outcome, where do you think that leaves the American people? My sense is impeachment of the highest order, the third time in the history of the country, that articles of impeachment will go to the full House of Representatives. That is profound. My sense is there's a disconnect among Americans. Maybe they're Republican, maybe they're Democrat, maybe they're independents, but they believe that this is a foregone conclusion. What is your sense of that, sir, from your post?
Yeah, well, two things. I think you're right. When I talk to my constituents, they all understand and believe that it's a foregone conclusion, that this was all baked in to this whole process. So when Adam Schiff started this inquiry about 2.5 months ago, we all knew that he was going to come up with impeachment because, I mean, that's what he's been saying he's wanted to do since President Trump was elected. So that was one thing. And so the constituents know that. And the other thing is, both parties in Congress know that. And so, in some sense, you have to get in there and fight the best you can. But we understand the outcome. Elections have consequences. They have the majority. The problem with that's gone on with this is the rules are designed to protect the minority, and the majority has abused those rules through this process. And that's lost on the American public in many ways, I suppose. But the reality is done irreparable harm to this institution besides going after the president. So they've really caused a lot of problems that I think they're going to have to live with for actually quite a number of years to come.
You mentioned Adam Schiff. He was on Stephen Colbert here in New York last night. Here's a part of that.
The senators are going to have to decide. Do they want to hear from people like Bolton and Mulvaney, or are they simply going to say, we don't want to know anymore, because the truth we've already seen is damning enough. It's already hard enough for us to justify to the country why a president who would do such things should remain in office. We don't want to see or know anymore. It's see no evil, hear no evil, do a lot of evil, seems to be the philosophy.
I want to get your reaction on that, sir, Congressman.
Well, this is the same Adam Schiff that basically lied for a couple of years that he had absolute defining proof that President Trump cooperated with the Russians to skew the 2016 election. Turns out after 2 years and a lot of investigation, that wasn't true. He's the same Adam Schiff who stood up before the public and said, we didn't meet with the whistleblower before that complaint was filed. Turns out that was a lie as well. Then he issued his big report, and it's filled with nothing but hearsay and innuendo. And that's the real problem with this thing. If we would have had an open inquiry, I think America would have been more interested. But it's been kind of baked in. It's been a kangaroo court, and he started it off in basically in a classified room. Yeah.
I just want to move to one more thing here. After the House, you got the Senate, and that'll be in January. Mitch McConnell made it pretty clear with Sean Hannity last night that this is going to be a really short deal in the Senate in all likelihood. Here's what he said on that.
The case is so darn weak coming over from the House. We all know how it's going to end. There's no chance the president's going to be removed from office. It wouldn't surprise me if we got 1 or 2 Democrats.
Okay, so that's where the senator is there, and he runs that side of Congress, sir.
Yeah, I've talked with a number of my friends on the Senate side, and I think a couple things are going to happen. You're going to go probably a couple weeks where it's just going to be reporting. This is what was reported in the House, and it's going to come out of the House, and the Democrats have their committee. They get to make their case. The question is, after those 2 weeks or so, does the Senate decide at that point to expand and bring in a bunch of witnesses or not? I think you heard it right there. I don't think Mitch McConnell wants to do that. That's what I've heard. There's a different thought, though. There's some senators that would like to see this go for a full hearing and bring in not just the people that Mr. Schiff wants to bring in, but bring in people like the whistleblower,
well, if you were to make the case for the White House, what do you think the right answer is on that? McConnell says, my hope is that it's a shorter process rather than a long and lengthy process.
I think that the best for the White House, and it could go either way. I think there's arguments either way. I would prefer to see witnesses come in so we could find out everybody from Alexandra Chalupa to the whistleblower. There are so many people that could come in and shed a whole lot more light on this than what the Democrats have done in the House. And so I think they're going to go the short route because I think they want to move on. And there's no way that you're ever going to get the votes in the Senate. And Mitch McConnell's right. The case.
Hey folks, thank you for tuning in with hashtag GoRight with Peter Boykin. I'm glad you checked out all the clips today and you've caught up with what's going on with the impeachment hearing. It's unprecedented and it's bullcrap and it's completely partisan, but the only thing we can do, folks, is cheer on Donald Trump and make sure that we get Republicans elected in both the House and the Senate in 2020 and get Donald Trump reelected. There's not much we can do. You can't argue with psychopaths like they are on the left. The only thing you can do is support people like me and the podcast that I do. If you'd like to help out, you can join the Patreon at patreon.com/Peter Boykin to help with the costs of getting these kind of products out to you. Basically right here, support the show. Subscribe to our Patreon. It's patreon.com/Peter Boykin. We can only get the word out more because we have to fight the social media giants who are trying to squash the voices like myself from getting out there. Please visit our websites, themaganetwork.com, peterboykin.com, magafirstnews.com, and magaoneradio.net, and there's many other websites. You also can go to the YouTube. Well, sorry, I do it right. There we go. Go to our YouTube, the youtube.com/C/Peter Boykin, or the Facebook website, GoRight with Peter Boykin, or Telegram at t.me/RealPeterBoykin. Because without your support, we can't get our word out. It's very hard. You know, I was suspended from Twitter. Hopefully, maybe eventually I'll get that back. I just saw that they have said that they were going to verify all current candidates, but they weren't going to do that to Laura Loomer for some reason. All right, but share it. I'm going to post this. I usually go live on Facebook because Facebook streams a little bit better. I edit it and I replay this live on live on tape on YouTube. And so check it out. I'm also going to be trying to find some other venues as well, but that needs you to help us and support. So again, subscribe. Patreon.com/Peter Boykin. God bless. Peace. It's been #GoRight with Peter Boykin. God bless.
As long as we have pride in our country, confidence in our future, and faith in our God, then America will prevail.